Hello and welcome to the program. I am Deji Badimasi. After the Federal High Court declared bandits as terrorists and the federal government gave life to the declaration by gazetting the order, Nigerians expected a total war against the terrorists, which would signal the end of banditry across the country. But the hope of a conclusive offensive against this bandit terrorist is beginning to dim as insecurity continues to fester, especially in the country's northwest. The Nigerian Senate, during Wednesday's plenary, expressed shock that despite the declaration of bandits as terrorists and increased budgetary allocation for the military, the terrorists are still carrying on with their killings and destructive activities in the northwest of the country and, of course, some other parts of the north. Now, the reaction of the Senate came against the backdrop of the massive killings and destruction still being perpetrated by the terrorists, like, of course, Boko Haram, the Islamic State West African province, and, of course, these bandits that have now been declared terrorists. And these attacks, of course, have been taking place in states like Katsina and other parts of the country. Consequently, the upper legislative chamber has now asked the federal government to urgently deploy enough military personnel and fighter jets to flush them out of their hideouts. It also urged security agencies to comb all known hideouts of the terrorists, kidnappers, and insurgents in the country. Well, joining me on the program now to discuss this further is Ebenezer Oyetakin, who is a security analyst. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. First off, let me get your take on this call by the Senate that bombers, jet fighters now should be sent to flush out these terrorists. Because I know that as we speak, there's been, a number of raids now. I'm talking about air raids now conducted by the military. But then these bandits or terrorists, if you like, you talk about the insurgents as well. It appears they're still digging in.
Well, the bandits has been declared as terrorists by the federal government, and Nigerians have always known that they are part of the terrorist network that are programmed to destabilize Nigeria. A drastic situation calls for a drastic approach. So the call of the upper chamber, the Senate, for the deployment of more personnel, military personnel, and deployment of fighter jets, though we know that the fighter jet has been engaging for some times now, but honestly, the engagement has not been a drastic engagement as should be. We also know that this federal government under the President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, has funded the military much more than ever.
Yes. We
have procured different kind of armament, both from the axis of United States, the Tucanos, and from China, from Pakistan, and some from Turkey. We have done so much. If we have invested so much in our military and security forces, we will expect a return that is commensurate with the investment that has been going on. That being said, we do not want to see the Nigerian military particularly, who has been able to procure peace for other countries in the African sub-region. We don't want to see them as being helpless in this situation. So we can only call on them and support the call by the Senate that there should be a more drastic approach, a sustainably drastic approach. It is not an approach that you go today, you fetch them out here and the rest of it, then you go to relax and they regroup. We must sustainably pursue them from their holes, wherever they may be, and as we are pursuing them, we are making other security sister organizations to occupy, like the police. Wherever the military has been able to dislodge, the police should occupy, and the community, we should have a community kind of synergy. Thank God that within this last week, the northern traditional rulers met in Abuja in order to also create that kind of a synergy.
You did talk about a more drastic action, and of course you're right. I mean, this government has invested so much in the military than probably any other government, maybe before the Nigerian Civil War or probably shortly after. But no question at all that this government has invested so much. And the Senate did confirm that basically everything that the military asked for has been given to it. So what more drastic action would you expect to see other than what the military is doing now? Because it appears people are not understanding that, look, these terrorists have been deeply entrenched, and that to get them out and, to actually get them out of their hideouts and to wipe them off will really take some time.
That is why I said initially that our military are not helpless. They know what to do. They know how to get it. What it requires, these drastic actions I am talking about, is that the onslaught on them must be sustainable. There are people that are hiding behind the scene, both in the political cycle, in the organized sectors, organized crime sector cycle, which are also effectively linked to the political cycles. Most of these people are traceable, but because of the nature, the complex nature of organized crime structure and the rest of it, our military may be finding it difficult. For example, even in the military hierarchy and the rest of it, it may not be out of place to find people that are sabotaging our military operation, our security forces operation, passing information to the what do you call it, the bandits or the terrorists, whichever name we want to call them, on when our military are going to move and things of that nature. And once that kind of a sabotage exists within, the fights become much more difficult. So the drastic action is that the military must fish out and set up a kind of on-the-shoulder monitoring of their own system, of their own operational system and operational base, so that at the end of the day, the drastic actions will call for sustainable onslaught. You don't go, you fight, you withdraw, and they regroup. Make sure that you chase them wherever they may be, and that is the order that Mr. President.
But the question is, does the military have the personnel to execute this kind of operation? I mean, you look at the number of military men at our disposal. Do you think the numbers are enough? And then you look at the fact that, look, these terrorists are operating essentially across the north of the country.
Honestly, we have been complacent about growing the size of our military and growing the size of not only the military, the security forces in tandem with the growth of our national population. We have been complacent. That being that, the military as we have today and employing technology, our military is well positioned to save us as a nation. And we know, we have confidence in them that they can achieve it. All it takes is that a synchronized, intelligence gathering system and ability to exploit technology and to move in a sustainable manner. You do not hit, they run and you go to relax and waiting for them again. You take it to them wherever they may be. You enter the Sambisa, you enter the Lake Chad regions, wherever they are domiciled, you continue to sustain the war. We have done it in other countries that are not our own country, where we are helping them to restore peace. If we achieve it there, we can achieve it now.
But you must also agree that, it's not enough to have jet fighters, because if these jet bombers go to carry out bombings and raids and what have you, and they leave, and you don't have ground forces going in, to take over the ground, you may not achieve, 100% results, so to speak. So when you hear the Senate saying the military should deploy the jet bombers, it appears they are giving the impression that is not being done, because we know that is being done by the military. We hear constantly now of several air raids now conducted, and successful air raids now conducted by the Nigerian Air Force especially. So it
has been conducting some certain level of successful air raids on the bandits, but you don't raid them, and once you raid them at the up. You allow the combined security forces to move on the ground, to occupy, to displace them, and make sure that wherever the next place they evacuated themselves to is not safe to them. You do not allow them to go and regroup until we engage. That is the drastic approach that we are talking about. And I'm sure that is the drastic approach that the Senate are alluding to also. When you move them out of, Katsina and the rest of it, you chase them into Zamfara, you move them into Zamfara, you chase them out of there, you kept us chasing them. If they now get barricaded at the level of the Lake Chad region, you take the war to them. If you have to bump them into the water, you bump them into the water, and things of that nature. That is the sustainable way it must take. And the military understand it much more than us, and we know that they can achieve it. But we must also be very cautious about infiltration into our military by the intelligence unit of the either Boko Haram and the terrorist group and things of that nature, so that they do not continue to leak the operational strategy of our military. Like I said, our military and security forces are not helpless. They can achieve it, but they must work on the intelligence gathering mechanism and make it effective. And apart from this, the kinetic actions alone is not enough to defeat the Boko Haram. That was why I alluded to the fact that the traditional rulers meeting in Abuja recently under the auspices of the Northern Traditional Rulers Council, headed by Sultan of Sokoto, is a step in the right direction. But it should not end with talk show alone. They have a lot to do, because we know our children are involved, our husbands are involved, our brothers and our uncles are involved. When we begin to report them accordingly and expose them to the right quarters of our security axis, we will be able to defeat all of this.
All right. Mr. Oyetake, security analyst, thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your thoughts with us. Thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll take a short break now, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, it looks like the country is not done with the debate and controversy over the electoral amendment bill, even after the National Assembly further amended the clauses that had generated so much debate from inception. Now, the alleged clash between governors and federal lawmakers over two new clauses may, and underline that now, may affect the signing of the re-amended electoral bill by President Muhammadu Buhari. The National Assembly earlier in the week transmitted the re-amended electoral bill to the president for his assent after addressing the reservation expressed by him on the previous amendments made to the Electoral Act. In the reworked bill, the lawmakers provided three options: direct, indirect, and consensus. They also introduced two clauses which seem to have opened another round of power play and controversy. One of the contentious clauses of the bill is Section 84, which provides that, quote, a political party that adopts a consensus candidate shall secure the written consent of all cleared aspirants for the position, indicating their voluntary withdrawal now from the race and their endorsement of the consensus candidate. It also states that where a political party is unable to secure the written consent of all cleared aspirants for the purpose of a consensus candidate, it shall revert to the choice of direct or indirect primaries for the nomination of candidates for the aforesaid elective positions, end of quote. The second contentious clause in the re-amended bill provides that all political office holders at the state and federal levels should resign before the primary election for any elective office they are seeking. Some of the governors, of course, are saying the amendment is a booby trap set up by the lawmakers to whittle down their influence ahead of the general elections. Well, the onus is now on President Muhammadu Buhari, who has weighed all the options now in order to get it right. So we'll wait and see whether the president would give his assent to the bill. But joining me on the program right now to discuss this further He is political affairs analyst Jide Ojo. All right, Mr. Ojo, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Let me start by asking you what you make of this fresh round of controversy again, because when the National Assembly made that amendment, that the president had actually asked for, we thought everything was fine, and we were just all waiting for the president to give his assent. Of course, the president hasn't said anything, but no one would have expected that another round of debate would come up again.
Well, I think the president needs to redeem his image now, rather than kowtowing to the whims and caprices of the governors. He needs to just do the needful. If the governors are not comfortable with what he has signed, they have option to sponsor through the president an amendment. Otherwise, they can approach the court. They have seen it happen with 2006 Electoral Act, where Conference of Nigerian Political Parties went to court to challenge Section 91 of that 2006 electoral law. And the court, struck out that section on the ground that it was conflictual with constitutional provision in Section 228 subsection C. And it has to do with the issue of sharing formula for grants, INEC grant to political parties. So what I'm saying invariably is that the president cannot continue to go to or to dance to the whims and caprices of the governors. Whatever the National Assembly has done this time around, I think the president just show assent. And like I said, there are two options available. It's either the president sponsors an amendment, or the Governors Forum can, through the members of the parliament, also sponsor a private member amendment to the law, just like in the case of Petroleum Industry Act. Otherwise, they can approach the court to seek redress. But I think the National Assembly should be commended for bending backward and not overriding the president's veto.
It would appear, looking at the amendments now, it would appear that the contention is the introduction of the consensus clause. But is there anything wrong with what the processes through which a consensus candidate now can emerge, as identified as contained in that section now by the National Assembly now? Is there anything wrong with that consensus section? Because the assumption from what we have heard is that, look, this is a design, a booby trap, as the governors have said, to whittle down their powers, even though the governors have not openly come out to say anything. But is there anything intrinsically wrong with that consensus clause that the lawmakers introduced?
There is a lot that is wrong with it. There's a lot that is wrong with that consensus option. Deji, I've been on your platform in time past to discuss issues around the APC internal crisis. What did you think brought about that crisis? It was the congresses that were held last year, the ward, the local government, and the state congresses. And if you recall what happened during those congresses, the APC, because it has a consensus clause in its constitution, the constitution of the party, decided that they were going for consensus candidates. And who are the people who benefited most from this consensus option? They were the governors. And APC is in control of about 22 states. Just imagine the Abdullahi Adamu Senator Abdullahi Adamu Reconciliation Committee just submitted an interim report a couple of days back and was even seeking more time to reconcile the warring factions. What brought about these shenanigans within the APC was the adoption of this consensus option. You are in Lagos. You saw the group, Lagos for Lagos, who challenged the dominance of the Tinubu's camp over the issue of just, writing names of people who should be the ward executive, the local government executive, the state executive. The same thing happened in Ogun. The same thing happened in Osun. The same thing happened in Ekiti. And look at the just concluded primary in Ekiti. Even though the APC claimed to have adopted direct primaries, but it was more like a consensus in quote, because it was the anointed candidate of the governor who carried the day.
So the question then is, look, whether it's direct, indirect, we can't dismiss the fact that, look, the governors will obviously have an influence. But if you look at the consensus, the clause that the lawmakers introduced, saying that, look, for a consensus to happen, all the aspirants have to agree to voluntarily withdraw for that consensus candidate, and that even after that consensus candidate has emerged, there will still be something like, a convention, so to speak, where the members would come to adopt that consensus candidate. So is there anything wrong with the insertions now that the lawmakers have made in that consensus clause?
That's what I'm saying, Deji. Nothing is wrong with what the National Assembly has done. They simply have learned from the pitfalls of what happened in APC, where the governors just write names of their loyalists and courts and cronies and dump it on the party as the consensus candidates across the world, local government and state chapters. If you read today's papers, a lot of insinuations were on that many people lost out because now the caretaker committee has inaugurated the chairpersons or chairmen of APC across the 36 states, which means those who felt aggrieved, their grievances have not been assuaged, they have not been reconciled fully, and now it will seem that the governor's camp has won. And having planted their loyalists at these different layers of a party hierarchy, party structure, don't forget, these are the same people who will either become delegates if they are going to adopt indirect primary, or those who will be the one in charge of organizing the primaries, even if you want to go direct. But the consensus option is a lazy man's option. And I don't think it should find its way in our lexicon. There is nowhere across the globe, to the best of my knowledge, and I stand to be corrected, where a political party will be fighting shy of election. Why are they afraid of election?
But then if you look at what the lawmakers have, I mean, you look at the provisions, the conditions they created now for consensus candidate, you would say to a large extent is democratic. And I think that is where the bone of contention is. Because, I mean, what they've basically said is that, okay, you want to do consensus, no problem. Just get the written consent of the other aspirants, indicating that they are voluntarily withdrawing from the race for these consensus candidates, and that you have to get their written consent. So if you do not get their written consent, you just have to fall back to either direct or indirect primaries. You look at that. Isn't that democratic enough?
It is. But let me also warn, Deji, let me warn that even if the president signs this bill, mark my words, the parties, you will see a high number of people being screened out before the primaries. Because with the caveat that there must be written withdrawal, official written withdrawal from the race by aspirants. What these oligarchs within the party, the governors, what they will simply do is to ensure that they populate the screening committee with their loyalists, and anyone they suspect will prove difficult from withdrawing from the race. What they will simply do is to screen him out, under one guise or the other. And I'm happy that there is also another insertion in this bill where the lawmakers, the federal lawmakers, have said you cannot impose any extra constitutional provisions in disqualifying any candidate. So whatever is not in the Constitution, you cannot use it as a basis to disqualify candidate, because that's what many of the governors usually would do. They would just say, oh, you know what, your tax clearance for 5 years, when you provide that, they will say you didn't pay your tax as at when due. On that basis, they can say that they are screening you out. They might even say that you are not healthy enough to contest whereas they are not the law, they are not the doctors.
The impression I get from all of this, the only reason why this issue of consensus is generating a lot of debate and controversy is, well, I'm not a seer, if you like, but you get the impression that that is the plan of whether the parties or the governors. That is probably, it's a consensus option that they plan to actually adopt when they want to conduct their party primaries. Because I really can't understand what this whole debate is about. What we had actually been talking about was direct or indirect, and the consensus option, exactly, you would think, well, at least further provides additional options, if you like. So why it is generating so much controversy is what actually beats me. But let me ask you this final question before I let you go. That provision that says every person holding a political office, whether at the state or federal level, must resign from their offices before the party primaries. What do you make of that?
I think that's where the bone of contention is, really, because there is no provision in the Constitution for any political office holder to resign
before primary.
Before primary, before he or she can contest for another office. What the law, although I must say,
and in this case, we're not talking about contesting for another office, but we're talking about for the primary election of the party to get nominated. That's to get nominated by the party.
That is very risky, and I think that is where the real contention is. It's not in the earlier one that we discussed, because I feel, although I have not seen a copy of the bill, I feel that we do not and we should not adopt the Bangladeshi option where people will resign ahead of another election. I know for certain categories of political office holder, like ministers, like people running for other political offices, there are constitutional provisions that says you must resign 30 days to election. Yeah. Recall that there was this controversy as to whether Kayode Fayemi resigned as minister for solid mineral ahead of going to contest for governorship election in Ekiti in 2018. And people are saying he should have resigned before the primaries, or that instead of resigning before the primaries, he resigned after the primaries. I think what the Constitution says, and I stand to be corrected, is that for such offices, you have to resign your earlier held office at least 30 days to the election. But you cannot now apply such to a governor or a president.
Of course not.
To go and resign before contesting for re-election. That would be dangerous because you are creating a vacuum. And that would be in breach of the Constitution.
Of course.
But what I'm saying is that in order for this controversy not to linger, let the president sign the bill and immediately sponsor an amendment. Otherwise, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice can approach the Supreme Court to seek interpretation and even the nullification of certain clauses which may be unconstitutional, ultra-vires, and null and void.
Could we assume?
So those two options are there.
Could we assume that provision, this provision we're talking about now, would only apply to political office holders, like in the cadre of ministers, commissioners, and all of that? That exactly. It would not apply to holders of the office of governor, deputy governor, the president, the vice president, because of course you would not expect the president to resign before he runs for a second term. That would obviously create a vacuum. You would not, for instance, would you expect, for instance, the president of the Senate, who is probably eyeing the governorship seat of his state, for instance, to resign from being the president of the Senate when he is running for the office of governor of his state? So he should resign before the primaries. It's a bit confusing.
That's why I said everything that is extra constitutional is null and void, which is what this electoral law has also upheld, that no candidate, no aspirant should be disqualified on the basis of anything that is beyond what is already stipulated in the Constitution. So if the Constitution has not been amended to say that for you to run for the office of the president, for you to run for the office of a governor, for you to run for the office of a local government chairperson, you must resign from the office if you are still the present holder of that office. That is dangerous. You can resign, and the law makes provision that if you are a public servant or a civil servant, you have to resign at least 30 days to the election. But where you are now saying somebody should go and resign ahead of party primary, that is very dicey. Because in a primaries, anything can happen. As I've explained on other platforms, even if you do not contest for the party primaries, you can still emerge as the candidate of the party, because your nomination can be withdrawn by certain provision of the law. But the point I think I need to submit, the clarity of my position is that that provision that you have read out is null and void to the extent of its inconsistency with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And I do not support that should create a leeway for the president to withhold assent for the second time. The president should still go ahead, sign the bill, and immediately sponsor an amendment. One, if he thinks the mood of the National Assembly is such that they will not want to work on the amendment, then he can urge the Attorney General and Minister of Justice to approach the Supreme Court to seek whether that provision of the Electoral Act, to the extent of its inconsistency with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, is not null and void. And I've given you instances in 2002, in 2001, some interest group went and challenged certain provision of Electoral Act 2001, and the court declared those provisions as null and void. That was what led to the passage of Electoral Act 2002. Also in 2006, I've cited the section 91 of that bill. Certain provision in that was also ousted by the court. Justice Abimbola Oge of Federal High Court then, in December 2006, said that provision that has to do with the sharing of the public grants to political parties, because it was lopsided in favor of the parties that have members at the National Assembly, the Conference of Nigeria Political Parties, under the leadership of Maxi Oku of ABGA then, went to court. I don't think it's ABGA. It was a party chairman then, Barrister Maxi Oku, approached the court, and the court in December 2006 nullified that provision of Section 91 and said that it is inconsistent with the provision of the Constitution in Section 228, subsection C. So the same thing can apply. Let the president sign. We cannot afford to throw the baby with the bathwater. This law, this Electoral Act bill, has lingered for too long, 3 years in the works, and election is fast approaching. Notice of election has to be issued. INEC has already said the reason why it has not issued notice of election was that it's waiting on the president for his assent so that he can then give the necessary notice.
All right, I really get you. Maybe, I don't know, but this is my own, should I say my own layman's interpretation of that last provision that we're discussing, that you said could probably be the bone of contention. Maybe there's a difference between elective of, I don't know how to put it now. Maybe there's a difference between elective office holders and political office holders. So maybe in this case, the political office holders would be referring to those who were appointed and not to those who were elected. I don't know, but probably would need some clarity on that. And we wait that clarity is provided by maybe the National Assembly or anyone, but all the same. Thank you very much, Jide Ojo, for joining us on the program and for sharing your thoughts with us on this very, very controversial issue. Thank you very much for your time. Well, that's how much we can take on the program this week. We thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.